Hi, I'm Glenn Anderson with the Olympia Fellowship of Reconciliation. This TV series explores a variety of issues that relate to peace, social and economic justice, and nonviolent social change. People typically think about democracy in terms of government, but why can't we also have democracy in how we run our economy? Why can't our economic institutions, such as our electric utility, respond to the will of the voters? This month's program explores the possibility of Thurston County's voters choosing to authorize our Thurston Public Utility District to provide electricity in addition to the water that it provides to parts of Thurston County. Dozens of other counties in Washington State, as well as cities such as Seattle, Tacoma, and Centralia, provide low-cost electricity to their people and are accountable to the voters. I'm happy to welcome two guests who are working in different ways on this. Chris Stearns is an elected official. He's one of 3 elected commissioners on the board of the Thurston Public Utility District, and he's responding to the citizen-based efforts of our other guest. And the Thurston PUD has also been exploring various lines of business anyway, including this one. John Pierce is the chair of Thurston Public Power Initiative, the grassroots citizen-based effort to authorize the Thurston PUD to provide electricity. So welcome to both of you. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you very much. Thank you again for having us.
Yeah. We want to make sure the viewers understand the distinct roles you have because you're with different organizations, but there's a lot of interaction. The citizen-based organization that John Pierce represents is organizing a county-wide initiative petition campaign to put this matter onto the ballot for Thurston County voters. Chris Stearns serves as an elected member of the Thurston PUD, which is conducting a feasibility study to find out whether electrifying Thurston PUD is practical. If the feasibility study shows that it is practical to move ahead, and if enough voters sign the initiative petition, the Thurston PUD would be the local lead agency and that would move ahead if the voters vote for that in November of 2012. I should note that when Chris is speaking here on the program, the perspectives he offers are his own, not necessarily speaking in the official capacity as PUD Commissioner, although he brings all that expertise and knowledge with him. And I should also mention that although I sound supportive of this, the Olympia Fellowship of Reconciliation, which has this program, has not taken a public stand. But it seems important to get this public policy issue out in front of the people because mainstream news media have just not been giving justice to this opportunity that the voters have. So we want to correct that oversight by stepping in. You can also get a lot of information from their websites, www.thurstonpud.com and www.thurstonpublicpower.org. Both websites have information about this. So, John, later on in the program, we'll explore the issues in more depth, but right now I want to just ask you to briefly summarize what the Thurston Public Power Initiative is trying to accomplish, and then in a few minutes we'll go on and explore these. What are you trying to do with this initiative?
Well, as you mentioned in your intro, Glenn, we're a grassroots organization who became aware early fall last year that it was possible to put an initiative in front of the voters and allow them to choose whether or not they want the PUD to have the option of taking over public power. Now that sounds a little, as I say it, that sounds a little wishy-washy. Basically, all we're looking for is choice. We need to get a number of signatures on petitions by July 6th. Once we have the 10,733 valid signatures, it goes on the ballot. There's a few more things that have to happen, but it goes on the ballot in November, and then the citizens get to choose whether or not the PUD would have the opportunity to take over power.
So it's a step-by-step process,
Absolutely.
and we're underway in that process.
Absolutely. Yes.
Thanks, John. Chris, later in the program we'll discuss more about public utility districts, but right now I wonder if you could just briefly summarize the Thurston Public Utilities District jurisdiction and role in this particular matter?
Okay, we're a county-wide jurisdiction, so we're elected county-wide as commissioners. We're accountable to the whole county, not just any small jurisdiction. A lot of people ask me, public power would only be in one city or whatever. It is a county-wide proposition, so it affects the entire county, and anybody in the county can support it or oppose it as well.
And you're exploring the possibility through a feasibility study that we'll be talking about in a few minutes.
Right, and the feasibility study is a sort of a fruition of efforts that have been made since I've been commissioner, which has been going on 3.5 years, where we were examining new lines of business to pursue, not just the expansion of the water utility that we currently have, but also going into looking at several lines of business. And I think it's important for the public to know that we received petitions last summer to go into electricity long before John's group and the people that are following what John is doing came along. And so the board received those petitions to the board and reacted to that, and that's why we have been slowly getting more focused on electricity, because we've gotten the most feedback on it.
Okay, well, I appreciate your responsiveness. That's what we want from local elected bodies, is responsiveness to the people. The viewers, I think, would need to understand the difference between the kind of publicly owned power utilities versus the privately owned ones, the utilities like Puget Sound Energy that are owned by giant corporations. And John, I wonder if you can tell us some of the differences, and including the role of the Washington State Utilities and Transportation Commission.
Okay, sure. Well, we'll start, since you mentioned the UTC, the Utilities and Transportation Commission, we'll start there. They are tasked by the RCW, by the law in Washington, to quote unquote regulate the private utilities. It's a watchdog organization or watchdog group, committee, that makes sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do. That's the theory behind it. They have to approve any rate increases. They take them to task if things are done wrong. They
Handle complaints.
Yeah, they handle complaints. So that's the body to whom the private utilities answer. Public power is different in that the public power, if the PUD in Thurston County were to take over power, they would be answerable to the people. As you mentioned before, there's a lot of public power. I think the number is about 52 to 55% of the electrical power in Washington State is public power. Yeah. That could be a public utility district, a co-op, a municipality like Tacoma or Seattle. Basically, the public power is owned by the people. Private power is owned by, as you said, a big corporation.
Yeah.
So it's basically letting the people own what the founding fathers called the commons.
Right, and then in the case of a privately owned, like electric utility or natural gas utility, the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission sets the rates. The utility submits a formal request to raise the rates by some amount, and the UTC goes through some processes to determine what the rates are, but they guarantee a profit of, what, 10.8%?
Currently, PSC is guaranteed a profit of over 10%.
Which seems humongous to me.
Well,
that's more than what you get in the bank.
Yeah, it is. It's more than you get almost anywhere. I'm a small businessman, and I have friends who are investors, and most of them would give their left arm to get even half of that kind of a return, much less guaranteed.
Yeah. This is guaranteed then by the state
by
government.
The UTC, yes.
Yeah.
And they approve rate increases. I don't know that they've ever disapproved one. They might knock it down a bit, but they always get some kind of a rate increase.
Yeah, and I one of the things that has annoyed me since I started studying up on this in about 1978 is that they're guaranteed a profit on what they have invested in assets, as well as a return on what their consumable costs are, like labor or paper or something. But if they have, this has annoyed me since like 1978, if they have a very inefficient way of generating power, like nuclear power, which is just phenomenally expensive, and it costs a humongous amount of money to get a nuclear plant, they get a 10.8% profit on that humongous, inefficient plant, whereas if they had some efficient way, more efficient way, they wouldn't get as much power. So they actually have a big financial incentive to be as inefficient as possible because they get more profit.
Yeah, I get that's one way to look at it. Before we go any further, I want to make one thing clear: is that, to the best of my knowledge, PSE isn't getting any of their power from nukes.
No, but I mean,
so I know that's an example you were using.
Yeah, well, they were trying to. They have had nuclear power projects in the past.
Sure, in the past.
And this is what happens in other states around the country.
Absolutely.
That where they buy into the nukes, they build the nukes, which are phenomenally inefficient and phenomenally expensive, and so that therefore it gives them big profits. And it just drives the wrong economic signals.
Well, exactly. And I think an example that's closer to home and closer to our recent memory would be the storms in January. They brought in crews from all over the Northwest. They brought in crews from Utah and Idaho, Oregon, all over the place. And everything that they paid out for that storm, they eventually will make a profit on. So that's another advantage of public power over private power, is that public power, because they answer to the people, as opposed to private power answering to the shareholders or the owners, they want to keep costs. Public power is more likely to keep costs down. In fact, every single public utility, every single utility in the state of Washington, except Orcas Island, or the San Juan Islands rather, which is a special case because they have to run the cable underwater for so far. Every utility in the state of Washington charges less than PSE. So if we go back to the January storm, when they brought in all these people, they have transportation, they have time to train them, they have to sleep and rest in between shifts. And it's overtime and double overtime and things like that. And they're getting paid a profit on all this. Now, to jump just for a second, if I may, we're still paying off in our increased rates the cost of the 2006 Hanukkah Eve storm, which was $90 million. They got a rate increase to help pay for that. The $72 million cost of this storm, I just read an article today that they're going to be putting in a rate increase for that extra $72 million, which to me is like, as a small businessman, it's like me having to buy a truck last December and having to buy a computer just within the last couple months. And it would be like me going to my clients and say, I'm raising rates because I had to buy some things to operate my business. Every client in the world is going to say, wait a minute, that's just the cost of your normal doing business. You have to absorb that in your way of doing things. And they don't. They budget $8 million for storm repair and storm upkeep. It cost $90 million 6 years ago. It cost $72 million a few months ago. You'd think they'd budget a little more than $8 million, but they don't have to because they're going to make profit on it.
Right, and it comes out of our pockets.
Exactly.
What are the main reasons why Thurston Public Power Initiative, the grassroots group that you work with, wants our PUD to provide electricity in Thurston County?
Well, we're surrounded, as I said before, by public power. Mason County has 2 PUDs that do electric. Grays Harbor County, Lewis County, Clark County down Vancouver, Washington, Clallam County. Jefferson County just voted for it 4 years ago. Tacoma City Light. There's all the ones. There's public power everywhere, and everybody has better reliability, local control, local jobs, better rates, and maybe not initially better rates, but over time they definitely would be better. It's about, the best analogy I've come up with so far, Glenn, is that we've been renting this house that is our electrical infrastructure for, well, PSE says they've been serving the area for over 100 years. So let's say for 100 years we've been renting a house. And all of a sudden, last fall, a few of us realized that, wait a minute, we have the option through Washington state law to actually buy the house. And that's what we want to do. Yes, it's going to cost a few dollars, but we're making an investment. You take out a mortgage to buy a house. Very few of us, unless you're Mitt Romney, can buy a house for cash. So we take a mortgage. There will be some bonds floated and some other things. I know I'm getting a little bit ahead of
Yeah.
myself.
And we'll
But,
we'll cover some more of that
you know,
later. So
that's
fine.
why we're doing it. We want
Yeah.
to buy the house
Yeah.
that we've been renting. We've paid enough rent that we've paid PSE for all the infrastructure, all the poles, all the wires, all the transmission towers. And now it's like, okay, we don't want to pay rent anymore. We want to buy it and own it ourselves.
I also think, Glenn, that in the instance of what's going on here locally in Thurston County, the power outages in January demonstrated a need for greater reliability in our county. When we suffer 90% or a large amount of houses out of power, and our adjacent counties barely scratch 15, if that much, there is a discrepancy. And I think the best way to address that discrepancy is have more people who are hired to be responsible for this grid in this county, providing jobs in this county.
Yeah.
Yes.
I grew up in Snohomish County, Everett, and we had the Snohomish County PUD, which has been
Exactly.
around since the 1930s. Electric rates were low. We used to vote for the PUD commissioners.
Exactly.
And when I was a kid growing up there, I just don't remember power outages like what we have in Thurston County. And it's a similar climate. I mean, it's not like it's a different thing up there.
If you know, they even have more severe windstorms at times when it comes down through the straits and hits that county, as it often does. My point about reliability is you know, key to understanding why people are frustrated and concerned about this issue right now. And it's not just the future rate increases. I think it's also care and concern for the elderly and the most disadvantaged when they're out of power for too long a period of time.
Yeah.
When you move to town and somebody tells you one of the first things you need to buy is an electrical generator, I mean, seriously, that's what happened when I moved here 14 years ago, way before I even considered this.
Yeah.
I mean, that's wrong. We shouldn't have to have generators.
Yeah.
Part of the problem is generated by the fact that, you know, PSE is a centralized company operating principally in eastern Pierce and King counties. Their repair and all the centers that operate all their repair operations come out of Renton, and we're thus subject to being at the end of the line as the counties to the north who have also expressed concern about their power and their service. So I think, you know, there's a reason why the periphery is looking at this system and saying we need more people here and we need to have it better. And whether or not this issue goes through, you know, for public power, obviously we here are very strong proponents. But I think the citizens of our county want better service one way or another.
I hear that a lot. Well, Chris, I wonder if you can tell us about the timeline and the activities related to this proposal that you're dealing with the Thurston PUD. So there are several things that are in the works. What can you tell us about the timeline and the activities that Thurston PUD is?
Well, John certainly
on?
is here to explain about his efforts with the petition.
Right.
I'm not involved with that directly. But in terms of the feasibility study, I can speak to what my board has done.
Yeah.
And again, this is a disclaimer that I speak only for myself, not for the rest of my board or for Thurston PUD as an entity. I'm just speaking for myself.
Yeah.
But I can report basically that our feasibility study is in the process of getting selected out of the top three folks who bid on the RFP, request for proposals, and that process will be determined next Tuesday, this month,
So
April.
that becomes late April.
Yeah, and then from there, we will have a final report available to the public at the end of August. Their work as far as doing the RFP and getting some feedback from us, you know, from after we select a contractor to do this, will be by June 30th. So there'll be some time between June and August before the final report goes out.
Okay, and they'll be looking, I saw the list of what you were asking for in that feasibility study. So that you're looking at a lot of different angles. and
Right, the
possibilities.
principal angle that I think PSE has been trying to state, we're trying to take the whole county, and that is not correct. We are dividing the county into discrete quantities of 50 megawatts, and Thurston County has an average megawatt load roughly around 350 megawatts. So we're not trying to open this effort with the whole thing. Taking on a staff like that and developing a staff and developing all the relationships that are necessary to go into a different utility takes time. And we want to do it correctly. We want to do it so that it can succeed into the future and that it doesn't take unnecessary risks. And I have other board members who are very good at managing risk, and I have trust in them that we will make better decisions by going at it in a careful manner. And so that's the slow approach is good. It also allows us to take more tier 1 power, which is what Bonneville offers us every 2 years.
And that's the cheaper power.
Right, and that makes it more cost effective to our customers as we grow.
Yeah. When we were preparing for the program and you and I were talking on the phone, you were bringing me up to speed on some things I didn't know about with Thurston PUD, because basically what I knew about it is that you provided water for Thompson Place and Tanglewild out kind of on the northeast corner of Lacey, and you told me a lot more about the Thurston County PUD's background and growth and accomplishments and capabilities, and I was very much impressed because you've expanded in a number of ways and you've done it well and competently, and you got some really top-notch people.
Well, yes, we do, and I can't take credit for all of it. I've only been there a little more than 3 years, but I will give credit to the departing commissioner, Paul Pickett, for his work to grow the PUD into the entity that it is now. When he inherited the PUD nearly 12 years ago, there was no staff. There was just a lawyer and the PUD commissioners. And today, through the purchase of a private utility which operates in more counties than just Thurston, also Lewis and a little bit in Grays Harbor, a little bit in Mason, but mostly Lewis and Pierce counties, there we have a staff that manages Tanglewild as well, whereas before it was managed by Olympia. And we're managing our own systems, and we're drilling our own wells, which have just been completed for Tanglewild and Reservoir that's being finished right now, so that we're using our own water supplies and will not need water from Olympia as much as we have had in the past.
So you're serving some discrete local areas in various places that needed the kind of services that you folks could provide, and they weren't getting it on their own. So you're helping them out.
Besides the systems purchased from Virgil Fox, there were other systems that are in trouble or their owners no longer wanted to manage them, and we purchased those systems from them. Yeah. Some of them have been rather small. It's a memorandum of understanding we have with our county commissioners who do manage the water resources of this county, that we can come in and be help transition ownership such that a system continues to run and continues to run effectively. And we have the staff and expertise to make sure that their water is good and remains being good and being tested properly to that end.
Yeah, I can imagine some people wondering, is this little water utility up to it, or is this going to be like over your head? And from what I've learned lately by looking into this, I find that you folks really are operating in a competent way, and the plans that you have would be to incrementally move in a way that you could manage it right.
And again, I have to thank my other board members. Alan Corwin, who's still remaining on the PUD, has expertise in bonds and purchasing and sales of bonds. We have recently, this past year, gotten a Wall Street bond. So that's one reason where we had to measure up to that threshold, and we surpassed it and got cheaper financing, which makes our PUD run more efficiently and getting cheaper interest rates on the money we borrow. So I think we have the right combination of competent talent to function in terms of our operations. Kim Gooby winning an award from the Health Department
and she's your
for being
Chief Operating
Officer of the Year, and I really thank her for the leadership she's shown in developing our staff, and also on the operations side, and also our financial manager, Julie Parker, who used to work at the UTC and knows the functions of that entity, but she has been the one who's led us through the bond purchase and to gain a greater foothold on being financially accountable.
Yeah, that was all news to me, so I had fun learning about the progress in the last few years.
In the years that I've been there, it's come a long way.
It's very impressive, and so I have a confidence now that you'd be able to handle that. And people should know that there's a long history of public power. The PUDs go back to the 30s.
That's correct.
And the municipal, like Seattle City Light, Tacoma City Light, Centralia, and a number of other cities
Have an early
and,
history.
And then there are cooperatives and mutuals. So a number of electric utilities that are owned by the public that go back for decades.
Yeah, and to that end, I'd like to point out that the history of the PUD was the state's first initiative, and it was passed in the 30s, and most of the PUDs that got formed, including our own in 1938, were formed in the mid to late 30s, some into the 40s, and that was when most of the utilities got into electricity at that time. So that's why the public has not heard about this very much, except for what happened in Jefferson County. And I'd like to point out, as far as being a first initiative, it's also the first petition this county has ever had in its entire history to do public power. And I think that's pretty amazing that, you know, we've waited all this time to actually take action on an issue that benefits everybody here.
Yeah. You mentioned just now Jefferson County. Can you tell just a little bit about what Jefferson County did? Because
Yes.
they could be kind of a model or somebody that we can learn from in Thurston County.
I'd be happy to. They had the fortune, just like we have with John, of having an engineer head up that organization. They were aligned very carefully with Sustainable Jefferson, which is a group that has been looking into energy issues 4 years even before the vote was taken in 2008. And so they have a long history of building public support. They have a smaller county, smaller base of public, and a much more unison thinking about where they want to develop their county in the future. And so I think they tapped into that and built a very strong campaign and debated PSE very carefully and forcefully. And I think their methods and their issues won out because they had the best argument to the public. The other counties didn't go the route of choosing to collect signatures as TPPI is doing, and they sort of didn't benefit from that because it became an issue of the PUD there taking the interest in public power rather than the citizens, and the utility focused on that issue and pretty much bludgeoned them with it. And in Whidbey Island, I think there just was no PUD whatsoever, and people didn't trust to create another
Well,
entity.
it would be a concept they weren't familiar with.
Right,
So,
and at least Jefferson and Skagit do have long histories in the water business.
yeah.
Well, it's actually surprising in talking with people out in the community, gathering signatures and doing different events and things such as this. I'm surprised to hear how many people don't even know that Thurston County has a PUD.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of that. So that's one big step up we have over, say, Whidbey and even some of the others, is that we have a PUD who has both existed for 80 or 70, 80 odd years and has constantly over the last decade been growing and taking on more responsibility. And this to me is just the next logical step of
it
that.
is.
And as a government entity, we have signed memorandums of understanding with our own county commissioners. We operate in Lewis County. We have an understanding with them, and Pierce County principally, and with their council. So we're considered a good actor to help solve problems.
John, let's look at some of the different advantages of going with electrifying our PUD. A lot of people appreciate kind of the buy local approach, the idea that it becomes accountable to local people as opposed to owners that are on the opposite side of the globe. It would be providing local jobs. It would keep the money in our local community where it would circulate around instead of being
Exactly.
shipped out to Australia. What can you tell us about some of these local advantages of electrifying our PUD?
Well, just to, if I can back up for just a second, you mentioned there Australia on the other side of the world. I'm not sure, did we cover already, just for the people who aren't familiar with this, the fact that
tell us about that.
PSE, about 3 years ago,
Yeah.
Puget Sound Energy was bought out by a
Consortium.
mega corporation, a
Yeah.
consortium out of Australia called Macquarie. And they own a lot of infrastructure, billions and billions of dollars worth of infrastructure all over the world, from what I can determine. They own
Chicago Tollway.
They own Sydney Airport also. And they're in the process, like every corporation, like the corporation that I own, of making profit, of making money. Unfortunately for us, they're making money on our backs by charging us for electrical power, more for electrical power than pretty much anybody else in the state is paying. And they would say it's because of this and this, and it's not. It's because they are in it to make a profit. And as we said before, they're guaranteed by the UTC a minimum 10% profit, 10.8 I think is the number. Public utility would be no profit. Governments don't make a profit. They break even.
Right.
The local jobs you mentioned. There used to be a lot of people employed in Thurston County by Puget Sound Energy. And back about 10, 12 years ago, I think it was, they started outsourcing those jobs to Bellevue and to Renton.
Yeah, Bellevue is where the corporate headquarters had been
Exactly.
for many years. And people used to complain that Bellevue was so remote. You know,
Right.
we want local.
Well,
and Bellevue, it was remote, and people complained because they were unaccountable at the corporate headquarters. Now they're on the opposite side of the world.
Well, and they've been very good at keeping that quiet. Very few people we talk to in an initial conversation have any idea of all this. They think they're still in Bellevue. I've had people say to me, well, if the public utility district takes over Puget Sound Energy's responsibilities to supply power gradually, as Chris was saying, that's going to hurt the people who own PSE stock. And there's nobody
no
in this
American
country,
stockholders
right,
anymore.
There's nobody in this country
Yeah.
that used to be that people bought PSE stock
Yeah.
because it was a really good investment. It was a guaranteed payoff.
Good dividend.
Right, it had big
Yeah,
dividends.
exactly. And that is no longer. Those people were all bought out, and we're not
3
hurting,
years ago.
Yeah, we're not hurting anybody except a major corporation's profit. So we're going to bring jobs back to Thurston County. Good paying jobs. Right now there's 4 trucks, maybe 5. So let's say 5 just so I don't get the number wrong. Let's make it high. 5 utility trucks in Thurston County with 1 person on the truck. Those trucks go out and maintain the lines. Well, if there's an outage, like let's say the power goes out at your house, you call PSE, you get the recording that says, yeah, we know the power's out, we're working on it, and you hang up. Well, if it's under 480 volts, which the stuff coming into your house is 120 volts, and it gets stepped down without getting too wonky. As Chris said, I have a degree in engineering, so I can get wonk real fast.
Yeah.
It comes from the source at a high voltage because you have lower line losses. It then gets stepped down in transformers and substations to lower voltages, and eventually the transformer outside the pole on your house, the outside on the pole outside your house, steps it down to 120, which comes into your house. Anything over 480 or anything more than a single phase, which most electricity is 3-phase, has to be done by more than 1 person. It needs a 3-person crew. So if a car hits a pole and the pole goes down, that's 3 wires, 3 phases. Doesn't matter what the voltage is. 1 person can't do it. Even if he or she calls another truck, 2 people can't do it. They get on the radio, they get on the phone, they call the call center in Renton. They explain the problem to them. They get all the people together that they need. They get all the gear and the equipment, the replacements that they need, and they get on a truck. They put it all in a truck, and they come down from Renton. As everybody here knows, if you've ever driven from Renton or to Renton, except for a couple different little pockets during the day, it's an hour, hour and a half. So from the time that car hits the pole till the time somebody gets there that can actually do something about it is 2 hours. And I used to be a firefighter, and when we went onto a scene where somebody was in a car, we had to stay away, obviously, from the wires and stuff, and we also had to protect them from the public until the crews got there, and it was hours sometimes. So if we had local crews, the call would go into a Thurston County call center. They would dispatch from Thurston County, and if you're in Yelm and need to go to Oyster Bay, that's what, 45 minutes? And that's not centralized. That's one end of the county to the other. If you're centralized,
Oyster Bay is on the west side of the
I'm sorry, I live out there, so that's,
Yeah.
It's almost to Mason County.
Yeah.
So we're talking about travel times, number 1. Number 2, we're talking about people who live in the county, who work in the county, and they're not only repairing possibly their own power, but their neighbor's power. There's a vested interest if you're working locally.
You have accountability to your neighbors.
Exactly.
You work for a public utility.
And the profits stay in town. If we pay somebody, if we pay PSE and they pay somebody who lives in Renton or Auburn or Bellevue or whatever, that money stays up there. If the PUD takes it over, the money stays here.
Right.
And as most people know, any dollar you spend locally
Gets recycled.
gets multiplied up to 5 times.
Yeah, it circulates and circulates.
Exactly, which is why I don't go to Walmart. I go to the local mom and pop stores
Yeah.
because it circulates in the community. Walmart, it goes to Bentonville, Arkansas. PSE, it goes to Bellevue and to Australia.
Yeah.
So we keep everything local. So there's a lot of other things. The PUDs in the surrounding counties trim the vegetation around the lines 8 to 10 feet away from the lines. PSE trims about 4 feet away from the lines. And according to one of their people at a community meeting I was at in February, I think it was, might have been March, anyhow, a recent community meeting, the main cause of power outages in the January storms was vegetation. Trees falling, other things happening, vegetation taking out lines. If you trim the vegetation, Chris mentioned earlier that the other surrounding counties did not go out for as long, did not go out as heavily, and were back up faster. PSE will tell you because Thurston County got the brunt of the storm. Well, if you drive up and down I-5 at all, you'll see that the trees started getting broken off in mid-Lewis County.
Yeah.
They got hit pretty hard.
Yeah.
Grays Harbor County got hit pretty hard. They had almost all of their people back with power within 24 hours, over 90 to 95%.
And they have PUDs.
And they have
that are
PUDs,
accountable to the local
exactly.
people. It's
And
local
if-
people doing the work.
Exactly. And if you do the prep work, if you trim the trees back before the storm, you don't have the trees knocking over as many lines during the storm.
And part of this maintenance question is also how the company responds in person. The PUDs answered the phone with real people. They called them back and gave them notice of when the power was coming up. I've had many citizens come up to me in Thurston County saying, not only was I mad about losing power and not knowing, what was happening, but then I got no notice, had no way to make plans as to seeing a hotel room or something to do for backup. They had no notification in this process during this emergency in January that enabled them to make proper plans. So they were even more frustrated by the lack of information than they were about the outage itself.
Yeah, yeah.
Think about it. If you're answerable to somebody, if for somebody out there who has a job and they go to an office, if they're reporting to somebody in that office, they're a lot more accountable than if they're reporting to somebody back in New York or whatever, because you can do a lot of things and
Right.
you're not as closely looked at. With the PUD, they're immediately accountable. If you want to, I got a call from somebody the other day who said, I can't believe I called the PUD and made an appointment to talk to the general manager, and I was in there the next day talking to him. Try and get an appointment to talk with the CEO of PSE.
Yeah,
First of all, you got to drive to Bellevue.
Yeah.
Okay, then you have to get the appointment, et cetera. It's not going to happen.
Or fly to Australia and talk to
well,
some.
yeah, that's not called
PO
PSE,
box.
but
Right.
If you wanted to get to the big boss,
Yeah,
forget it. You're
the
never going to
people
do
who
it.
have the ownership.
Right. You might be able to run into them at the polo match, but
Yeah.
I haven't been to one of those in a while.
One of the things that PSE likes to brag about is their green energy. And when we were talking on the phone, John, about this, you had a different take on the green energy stuff. Can you tell us something of
Well, their
a different
green
angle on it?
energy program is mandated by the government, by the state and
State
federal.
law 937.
Yeah,
Yeah, by the
initiative.
state.
The
They
people
have
of
to
the
have a
state
certain
passed
percentage.
Initiative 937 to require that.
Right. So whether or not you pay extra money into their green energy program, they have to have the green energy program. This is, from what I understand, and I've
They
talked
have
to
to do renewables. Yeah.
They have to do renewables. So from what I understand, I've never talked to anybody who said or gave me any indication at all that PSE has 1 extra kilowatt, which is the basic measuring block of electrical power. There's not 1 extra kilowatt of renewable or green power generated because of people buying into this program. PSE talks about over 5,000 people are paying into this program. I was into it until just recently when I found all this out. And it's like, wait a minute, I paid in 2010, I paid $117 more in my electric bill for green energy, and it didn't help generate even 1 extra kilowatt of green energy. I canceled the program.
Yeah, because they were required by law to do that.
Exactly.
So
We're adding to their profits.
Yeah, you're just adding pure profit when all they're
Right.
doing is obeying the law.
Right, exactly. There's no more green energy because of that program.
Yeah.
I mean, then they would normally have to do it.
It's already a firm mandate in law established by 937. I will give credit to them that they are the foremost leader in wind power in the state. A lot of it's concentrated very far away from here in southeast Washington state. But part of their business plan was to sell that power to California, what isn't required by the law to have here. And so they're, as you mentioned with the green program, they're in surplus. And now California has said 3/4 of the renewable energy that we require in our state has to be produced locally, which means all that power gets stranded. And that's one of the reasons why there's this huge drop in natural gas and all these power sources, because there's a surplus right now. Since the former business plan was to sell it to California, they can't do that with 3/4 of it now. And so it's made a lot of utilities have to raise their rates, because in their business plan, the subsidy of selling to California is no longer available to them. And so it's driven everybody's rates up. But that's the big power plan. I think people need to focus in on what benefits them here locally. When you transfer power, you lose some of it in transmission. If we can build a local decentralized grid, I think that's one of the ways to go.
Would a PUD based here be able to do more in the way of green or renewable or
I think
conservation?
you're seeing this with the other utilities. Certainly Seattle and Snohomish PUD has focused in on trying to accelerate programs where people can do rooftop solar, do things that conserve energy so that they don't have to be so reliant on the rest of the grid, which brings power in from far away.
Let's talk about anything that we haven't mentioned yet about comparing the costs of electrical service between what PSE is charging versus what a PUD could do. If we were to convert to having a PUD provide electricity for some part or all of Thurston County, John, can you tell us something about what the price, how prices might be effective?
Well,
You could start with where we are now.
yeah. We are currently, as I said a couple times before, paying the highest rates in the state. As far as what it would actually cost in cents per kilowatt hour, we don't know. That's one of the things that the feasibility study we hope will tell us. It will be, we're almost guaranteed that it would be less or maybe the same with the initial costs and then go down after that, because Chris mentioned before Tier 1 power from Bonneville. Tier 1 power, Bonneville is the federal power through the dam, the Bonneville Dam, and currently the rate on that power, they are selling it at cost. By federal law, they have to sell it at cost to public utilities. They sell at market value to private utilities. So if PSE were to use Bonneville power, they would only be able to buy it at market rates. The PUD would be able to buy it at Tier 1 rates. There's Tier 1 and Tier 2. Tier 2 is market. Tier 1 rates, which right now are under 4 cents a kilowatt hour. We're currently paying, based on 1,500 kilowatt hours per month, a PSE customer is paying 10.58 cents per kilowatt hour. So there's a big spread there. With the feasibility study, we would have a better idea of what that is, because they would look at the whole thing. So I can't give you a number. What I can tell you is
it's a big difference.
Oh, there's a gap. Yes, Jefferson County originally thought, I was at a meeting about end of March where PSC did a presentation where they were going on about how Jefferson County initially said it was going to be 8.2 or 8.3 cents a kilowatt hour. It turned out to be 10.05 cents a kilowatt hour is what they're projecting when they roll out in March. And they were crowing about the huge difference and how they got it wrong. What they forgot to mention, or somehow it just slipped out of the presentation, I guess, was that even at 10 cents a kilowatt hour, 10.05, they're still less than PSE. So even with the extra costs that they had, part of which was because they didn't
Startup,
their startup costs, and also they didn't negotiate very much with PSE. They just said, we'll buy the whole thing and we'll pay you this much money, and they reached an agreement. So I think they overpaid.
Right, so that cost that they're paying per kilowatt hour, part of that is the cost of actually buying the assets. So
Yes,
it's that
absolutely.
It's that own versus rent forever
Right, exactly.
analogy that you
Part of
said
that is your
earlier.
mortgage payment in there. Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
So that's
Exactly.
so that's-
And part of the 10.58 that PSE charges is their 10% profit. So if they got rid of just the profit, we'd already
Yeah.
be down under 9 cents, under
Right.
10 cents.
And a point I would make about rates, with a public utility, obviously the commissioners make the decision. They go through a rate hearing and they do a lot of research before they go into that for electricity, and then open it to public comment, get the public's feelings about it. A lot of people don't realize that there's not just the residential rates. There's
yeah.
small farm rates, both of which receive a pass-through subsidy, PSE, that customers I'm talking about in Thurston County, a pass-through subsidy called the Residential Exchange from Bonneville, which has nothing to do with PUDs other than they end up paying this bill. And it's a pass-through subsidy on the hydropower. Even if they don't get the power, they get some of the subsidy. But that does not affect commercial customers or industrial customers or even government for that matter, because they are not residential ratepayers and they're not getting that subsidy. So that's for certain. Those rates for those people in our county that produce jobs, that produce industrial growth, those customers will see significant savings in their rates because they don't get the subsidy that the residential customers get from BPA. And that's where there is significant differences between public power, especially PUDs, and a private utility.
If the Thurston PUD were to buy out some of the assets of the Puget Power, and I realize they wouldn't be buying out everything.
Right.
There are transmission lines that are owned by the federal government, BPA or whoever, and then Puget Power would still have assets here regarding their transmission of natural gas. That
Oh, yeah,
you're not
sure,
talking
yeah.
about touching the
No, this
natural
is
gas thing. That's
strictly electric.
That's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
So, but if you were to get, if the PUD were to buy the electricity-related assets, or some of them, you'd be able to finance that at low rate through municipal bonds, which you mentioned
Municipal
already.
bonds, which are tax-free, so that's one reason the rates would be cheaper, is because the bond costs are cheaper than what the private sector can come up with. There's no shareholders with the PUD, as you know, because it's a non-for-profit utility, so you're not paying that rate of profit to shareholders. And then the final reason, of course, is the Tier 1 rates. And we considered, a lot of people said, oh, take over the whole county, but growing a staff, dealing with the 937 laws that influence a county our size, I think it's wiser to grow a utility gradually, do it in a conservative manner financially, and do it right the first time. Work out the bugs early so you're not making massive mistakes. I think that's the best way to grow the utility in the long run.
And your feasibility study allows for this incremental approach.
Right.
And so
If
that's
I
a
can
good way to
explain,
go.
if I can jump in for just a second here, it's the analogy that I like is it's like the question, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And it's the same thing with the way that we at Thurston Public Power Initiative, and it sounds like the same thing that the commissioners are on board with looking at with the RFP, and that is that you look at the different chunks and you take whatever makes sense. The RCWs, the Washington state laws that allow this to happen, say that within 10 years, the PUD basically has to light one street light. They have to have one customer provide power literally to just one customer. So they could literally flip a switch, a street light goes on, that's PUD provided, they're in. The window stays open. So they have 10 years to do that. Now it's going to be a lot less than that, I'm sure. But to do the first thing, and then the window stays open, they can take their sweet time with it, if you will. And so the beauty of this is that all the initiative's doing is giving the voters the choice in November to choose public power option over private corporate power, monopolized power. And then the PUD has the option to take over the power system in whatever way it sees fit, whatever way is best for the people of the county.
And the people always have recourse at the ballot box. If they don't like what the PUD is doing, vote out some commissioner, vote in somebody that would like better.
There is a commissioner up for election every 2 years.
Okay.
And in this small approach, I think the public gets to witness what we're doing, gets to compare, as they compare right now, the surrounding PUDs and the prices they pay with the current utility.
And the reliability.
And basic statement I want to say to the public is let us compete.
Yeah.
Let us have the chance to prove that we can do a better job.
Yeah. There's a question that came up about buying out the assets where one of you said that a Puget Power person tossed out a number of $1 billion, but the assets that are actually listed are 131 million, which is only like less than a seventh of what this billion. So it sounded as though, I mean, to my ears, it sounded like the Puget Power person was trying to scare people away by just tossing out this wild number without
any private sector concern is faced with a situation where it would have to sell assets if it is proposed to do that, would try to inflate what those assets are. It's only a recognizable negotiating strategy is if you have come to the plate with a higher bid, you're dragging it. The middle is in between what the higher bid is and what the real cost perhaps could be. It drags it further up. And I think that's what happened to Jefferson County. They did not want to argue, they did not want to go to court. And they successfully achieved that. They settled out of court. But I think in this instance, we have no choice but to go to court. And even so, even if the utility chooses that strategy to be litigious, which they might do in serving their own best interests, in the end run, on the court steps, on the last day when the decision is made, they will settle out of court because they don't want a judgment to go against them.
The actual quote was up to $1 billion. And when I heard that, I went and did the research and found out that the actual Department of Revenue's assessed value is, as you said, $131 million. So where they're going to come up with the other $870 million worth of expenses, you know, I don't have any idea.
Well, 131 million is up to a
upwards
billion.
of, yes, exactly.
It's not more than $1 billion.
Well,
but a nickel is up to $1 billion too. So it's a scare tactic.
A large portion of this is severance costs when they talk about leaving the county, and that is a long process because we're not trying to take it over all at once. We're trying to do it a small period at a time, and we have to succeed. We're still having to prove to the public we can do this. And so I wouldn't count them out in any way, but I'm just saying when they include severance costs, they often try to bring in costs that have no relevance to the discussion. When they signed with BPA to transfer energy over federal lines, they signed an agreement to provide public utilities with access to electricity that are inside their own system. And that the public should know. They can't argue that we have to buy those transmission lines when they have contractually obligated to provide that energy through their system anyway.
Okay.
Exactly. So those big transmission towers you see, there's some out on 101. Those are the high voltage transmission towers, which, as Chris said,
BPA.
They have to allow public utilities access to those towers. So it could be that PSE is saying that the PUD would have to buy everything within the Thurston County boundaries, and they make it sound like it would have to happen January 1st. None of that is anything close to what the reality is.
Is there anything else we need to say about the feasibility study or about the initiative process? The feasibility study is what the Thurston PUD is working on, and the initiative process is what your grassroots.
Well, all I want to emphasize to the public again is that the feasibility study was brought forward to give people an objective idea of what the costs are. It's not for a canned result of, yes, we're going to go do this. It's going to give the county the opportunity to see what are the real difficulties, what are the real assets, the pluses and minuses as any new proposal would have, and have a fair and objective environment, discussion over what we can bring to the table for the county and how the county can benefit from it in the long run. And hopefully people will see that it's objective enough to see the pluses and minuses and weigh it out for themselves.
Yeah, when I read the summary about what was the feasibility study would include, and it looked like this is the kind of thing that we would need in order to make an informed decision. Both the PUD to make a decision and the voters. And so I thought this is good, and you want to get the objective facts out there, like you said.
And that's all we're asking. Thurston Public Power Initiative is interested in putting this out there and seeing if it is feasible, seeing if it is possible. we need signatures on the petition so that we can get on the ballot. And then we need people to vote for it informed. We need an informed vote, because the more people hear about this, the more people realize what's really going on and what this is really about.
Yeah.
This is not taking over and kicking PSE out of the county January 1st, 2013. Not going to happen. PSE is going to be around for quite a while, whether or not this goes forward. If it does go
It
forward,
will always be there for gas.
absolutely,
Yeah,
they will
for
always
gas.
be there for gas. This is just
Yeah.
taking over electrical.
Right.
There's nothing that I've seen in Washington state law that would allow the takeover of gas. There might be.
I don't think
but
we want.
We don't want that.
Yeah.
We're strictly looking at electrical.
Yeah, yeah.
So we need. Go ahead.
Okay, well, so I think that it's good to let people know not to be panic stricken.
Oh no.
And not to be intimidated by the fear mongering
Yeah.
that, oh, it's going to cost you $1 billion, oh, this or that or whatever.
Well, and I could say it's going to cost 12 cents, and they're both
Yeah.
equally wrong.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm probably closer.
Yeah.
So the whole point here is to inform yourself.
Yeah.
If you need to watch the show again, watch the show again.
Yeah. Well, and
If-
people can watch it on our website,
Exactly.
olympiafor.org. It will.
It's my
debut-
turn for a plug.
Okay. No, but it
I know.
will debut after the
Right.
soon after this program debuts in early May.
May,
We'll
right.
get this onto our website, olympiafor.org, and people can watch it there.
Exactly.
Great.
But they need to come to the thurstonpublicpower.org website and
Yeah.
learn. They can email us. They can phone
Yeah.
us. We're out there collecting signatures at the farmers market, at a lot of different
Yeah.
venues and events. And use the phone numbers, use the email addresses, and
Right.
ask us questions.
I want to put in a plug. We're nearly out of time, but I want
Yeah,
to put in
I
a
get
plug
that.
for the website.
Yes.
They can learn a lot more about the PUD angle by going to thurstonpud.org.
.com.
I'm sorry. I keep thinking because you're nonprofit, it's
Right,
org, but it's .com.
it's .com.
So thurstonpud.com, and then your outfit is thurstonpublicpower.org.
Correct.
And there's a lot of information at both websites. I encourage
Yes.
people to get informed, and like I
Yes.
say, watch this program again.
Absolutely. And as I said, email us, ask us questions.
Yeah.
We want an informed public.
Yeah. And
Because an informed public will sign the petition and will vote for
yeah,
this.
yeah.
And
So
again, I dedicate doing this feasibility study, getting the word out to some of my former commissioners like Joe Hummel, who worked at the UTC, because they wanted the truth out. They
Yeah.
wanted to let people know. We have a very intelligent electorate, and I think
do.
they want
Yeah.
more
You
information.
bet.
They want to make a very informed choice, and we wouldn't be presenting this to them unless we were doing it objectively. I know a lot of people are skeptical of government, but people are also skeptical, as we know, of large corporations.
Yeah,
So
even more so.
Even
And
more
this
so.
Is
And
very
this is local government.
This is very
This is-
local.
and this is local government.
as real
A lot of
people,
people-
you can touch your PUD commissioner.
Right, and they often make their
Yeah.
concerns aware to
Yeah.
me very frequently and very often.
Okay.
And I appreciate that. I appreciate the public's
Yeah.
involvement in this
Well,
process.
I want to thank Chris Stearns, and I want to thank John Pierce. I want to thank all the folks who've been watching.
Thank you, Glenn.
The people here really do support democracy, and it makes sense to support democracy also in how our economic systems, our economic institutions like utilities function. We have the option to own it ourselves instead of paying rent forever and ever and ever, to use John's helpful analogy. The initiative campaign is letting voters decide to sign an initiative petition until early July 2012. Mainstream media have not covered this adequately, so we need to lift up this underdog position. And then if that succeeds, then people will have a chance to vote in November 2012. And we do encourage people to hear all sides, make up your mind, and get involved. You can get information about a wide variety of other issues about peace, social justice, and nonviolence through the Olympia Fellowship of Reconciliation at 491-9093 or www.olympiafor.org. We're all one human family and we all share one planet. We can make the world a better place, but we all have to do our part. And you can help. The part that you can offer is just what's needed. Thanks.